my last video, I opened by talking about how I live under a rock, and will probably never be a YouTuber that comments on things in the first couple weeks that everyone else is commenting on them. And this video, as well as my eventual Tears of the Kingdom review, is another example proving this point. I finally watched Across the Spider-Verse and want to give a late to the game review. So here it is, and just so you know, it will contain spoilers. Overall, I didn't like the movie. It had some things I appreciated, but the things I hate about it were just too annoying for those positive aspects to overcome them. To begin with, there's the trans issue that I know a lot of people have already commented on. Trans Redditors picked up on the Protect Trans Kids flag that can be seen in a few shots on Gwen's wall, and the trans flag on her father's police uniform. This, combined with the narrative of a secret identity that both protagonist parents might respond to with hostility, and the trans flag colors that take over the background in the scene of Gwen's conversation with her father, led certain people to claim that Gwen's character is actually trans in the film. People have objected to this claim by stating that it is too much of a stretch to say that Gwen's character is trans, and I think they are correct. Unless it is stated explicitly, I don't think there's any reason to believe that the writers of the film actually included Gwen's trans identity as an underlying plot point of the film. But it seems to me that there is indeed a trans element that the creators of the film intentionally inserted. I simply can't buy the idea that it is a mere coincidence that they would heavily emphasize the colors of the trans flag, while actually including multiple trans flags in the background of the same environment where such colors become most prominent. It seems to me that there is an intentional connection here. While I don't believe it means that the character is trans, I do believe that there is a pretty clear attempt at drawing an analogy between Gwen and Miles's conflicts with their parents over their secret identities, and similar situations between teens who believe they are the opposite gender trapped in the body of the wrong gender. And this, I believe, leads to a moral that they are trying to push regarding this sort of scenario, as it pertains to the attitudes of parents. The conflict which requires character development for Gwen's dad and the Morales parents is that they are, in the view of the writers, too controlling over their kids and need to ease off to create a safe space in the home for their children to voice their true feelings. The theme of overbearing parents runs throughout the film, being expressed in the subplot of Peter Parker's anxiety over how to raise his infant daughter. He can even be seen toward the latter part of the film reading a book entitled, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. So this is clearly an idea that they are trying to push in the film and not just me reading into things. Basically, the moral of the story is that parents should abandon the traditional role of authoritative rulemakers and enforcers, and instead simply be therapeutic friends who let their kids adopt their own distinct identity, expressing whatever inner self they happen to believe is real, even if it goes against their morality. They should simply listen and affirm, even when they disagree with their child's actions. And clearly, there is an intended application for children who adopt the destructive idea that they're a different gender trapped in the wrong body. So yes, I do believe that Across the Spider-Verse is transgender and anti-traditional family propaganda. Now, a related theme in the film is the individual standing for good against the opposition of all societal structures. And this is not unique to the transgender propaganda being pushed by this film, as it is present in most superhero stories. They are generally vigilantes, whose actions to save their city are misunderstood by society, and they must take a lone stand for good, while the entire world is against them. But of course, the fact that the valid authority of parents is lumped in with these opposing societal structures makes even this leave a bad taste in my mouth. But if I can ignore this fact and treat Miles's narrative in isolation, I actually think the most fitting real-world analogy makes for a quite right-wing point when applied. Miles discovers that the Multiverse Spider-Man Alliance have figured out a good deal of the way that the multiverse timelines work, and they have essentially become deterministic in their outlook on their role as Spider-Persons, through the leadership of Miguel O'Hara, or Spider-Man 2099. They have discovered that there are certain canon events that are not to be tampered with, or else it will result in the world of that canon event being unraveled and destroyed. Miles discovers that this multiverse Spidey coalition has been plotting all along to prevent him from saving his father from the canon event of his certain death, which they believe would cause his world to be destroyed. Miles, of course, is committed to saving innocent lives without exception, and this puts him at odds with the deterministic approach of the other Spider-Men. Essentially, Miles is committed to the traditional code of a superhero to save innocent lives no matter the cost, while the others have traded this in for protecting canon events at all costs. While I highly doubt that this was intended to be the real-world application of this moral dilemma, the outlook of the Multiverse Spidey coalition strikes me as extremely similar to the scientific outlook of the managerial elite that have power over the modern world. By scientism, I do not mean to express a disdainful attitude toward science. Natural science is all well and good when it is confined to its own distinct field and does not try and swallow up all the others. But scientism, like many other isms, is a way of thinking that takes an idea and runs with it. It has a hammer and no other tools, so it starts thinking that everything is a nail to be hammered. In other words, scientism is the idea that everything, even questions pertaining to theology and philosophy, ought to be approached exclusively through a scientific framework. Thus, we should throw out metaphysics and faith and reduce everything to the study of matter in motion. We should therefore derive our conceptions of morality and justice not from God and reasoning concerning abstract concepts, but rather exclusively from the supposed brute facts that the empirical observation of the material world can give us. In the realm of politics, this has resulted in power being handed over to a bloated bureaucracy of so-called experts who rule based on spreadsheets and statistical projections, rather than universal concepts of morality, wisdom, and justice. Its ends have become entirely material in nature, on both sides of the political spectrum, and not concerned with the flourishing of humanity according to its created nature and telos. In Across the Spider-Verse, Michael O'Hara's limited scientific understanding of deterministic canon events caused him to take the role of superhero and transform it from a servant of objective good into the servant of an impersonalized mechanistic system constructed according to his fallible empirical observation. And in a quite similar manner, modern proponents of scientism have applied this exact same transformation to the role of civil magistrate. They do not uphold justice, traditionally understood as a universal and objective concept. Instead, they rule according to the latest fallible data collected by the mere empirical observation of material phenomena. The problem with this is that there is only room in science for the observation of quantity, not quality. Science can predict with a certain degree of probability what will happen if we perform some future action, but it cannot tell us whether we ought to do it or whether that outcome is good. Ought and good are in the realms of religion and philosophy, not science. Scientism is essentially the abolition of ought and good in favor of probabilities and projections. It is the tyranny of quantitative observations to the exclusion of qualitative judgments. Given that Across the Spider-Verse would have been more aptly titled Across the Spider-Verse Part 1, I'm not sure what will result from Miles's decision to fight against the deterministic projections of the multiverse realpolitik Justice League, but I have no reason to doubt that he is the good guy and is being presented as the one standing for good. So Across the Spider-Verse gets something right here in that it presents justice as a matter of objective good and evil, rather than scientistic determinism. The hero is the one that stands against systems constructed based on materialistic determinism, believing that the categories of ought and good are far more relevant to enforcers of justice than empirical projections. It is the triumph of objective morality over relativistic scientism. But considering that this was likely not the point of the film, the best thing I could take away from it requires a death of the author approach to interpreting it. There are a couple other positive things I can say about it, though. I'm glad at least that it centers on two families with straight parents, even if it's trying to subvert their authority to a certain degree. And it even highlights the importance of strong father figures in the household, and even makes the pretty based point that in a universe in which the black protagonist doesn't have a father, he inevitably becomes a criminal. That totally checks out. Another positive thing I can say about the film is that the visuals are usually pretty pleasing. My favorite shot, which is both enjoyable to look at and a pretty clever symbolic representation of the plot, is when Gwen and Miles are sitting upside down, but the camera tilts upside down to show them sitting right side up while the skyline of the city points downward. This shows visually that it is them against the world, whose conception of good and evil is flipped upside down. They are alone in standing for objective good. But again, this is spoiled by negatives. The film achieves visual harmony with its multiverse motif by mostly successfully harmonizing various animation styles, but at times it becomes a bit overstimulating. And its Lord Miller meta-humor, which I have enjoyed in their past movies, arises to overkill levels in this film. The constant visual stimulation and inability to have a serious moment without making fun of itself makes me feel like I'm stepping into the mind of the average Zoomer with the attention span of a gnat and so self-conscious that he must acknowledge his insecurities through self-deprecating humor every 10 seconds. I know I love to make plenty of jokes and don't take myself too seriously, having a sad Mario profile pic and all. But why are millennials and Zoomers so incapable of having moments of earnestness without burying it in mounds of irony? I'm pretty tired of this. People need to be able to take things seriously sometimes. Anyway, it's stupid. It's propaganda. I wouldn't recommend it, and I think that those in charge of putting trans stuff in a movie for children should be jailed for being groomers. but I suppose it's got some positive qualities that don't make it an absolute waste. Those are my thoughts on that. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe and all that.